Boldwood presents Lean on Me, written by Beth Moran and read by Rosalind Steele. The moral right of the author has been asserted. This performance is owned by Boldwood. Chapter 1. When, in my younger days, I idly contemplated the time I might one day go wedding dress shopping, it never crossed my mind that it would be a covert operation, accompanied by oversized sunglasses and a floppy hat, or that I would be the one to cry, and that if I did, those tears would be a combination of stress, fear, loneliness, shame, and feeling buried alive in a gold mine. It was Marilyn's idea. She bullied me into it. Currently drowning in the domesticity brought on by 9-month-old twins and representing the closest thing I had to a best friend at that point, or any point, in my disaster-strewn, battle-scarred life, she ignored my protestations that it was a waste of time. "No arguments, Faith. I need some romance. I'm going to remind myself what life was like before existing on 4 hours sleep a night and leftover mushed-up vegetables. And you need to show that bag of Botox, Larissa, who's boss. Get your jacket." Marilyn and I had met 3 months earlier at my first meeting with the Houghton Country Club Committee, known to its members as HCC. Most of the sleek, silky, thin women greeted me with patronising smiles before dismissing me as irrelevant. None of them recognised me from my time serving on the other side of the bar, but they had no doubt heard the gossip. Marilyn, on the other hand, grinned at me across the table. "Nice to meet you, Faith. Although I have to say the service in here isn't what it used to be. Someone told me their best waitress ran off with a millionaire playboy." I smiled and declined to comment. I didn't know if Perry was a millionaire or not, but he certainly deserved the playboy reputation. Until now, I hoped. After 2 hours discussing such grave matters as whether or not to ban non-organic cucumber in the cricket teas, Marilyn invited me for coffee at her cottage of chaos. I accepted, consuming enough cheesecake and hilarious HCC committee stories to send me home with a stomachache and sore ribs. And now, here we were, sneaking through Nottingham Lace Market on the hunt for a wedding dress. The assistant in the first boutique, before standing back to reveal my reflection. I gazed at the woman in the mirror, her dark auburn hair peeking out from a vintage-style veil and her miraculously cinched-in waist. The dress looked perfect, a neckline just high enough to cover the scar running underneath her collarbone, shimmer and shine to deflect attention from the wan, sunken eyes and hollow cheekbones. I didn't deserve this dress. I never expected or even hoped for it. People like me don't get dresses like this. In wonderment, forgetting the complicated reasons behind the whole need for a wedding dress in the first place, I stepped out of the changing room to show Marilyn, who was lounging on a stripy sofa with a glass of Buck's Fizz. "Hootin' tootin', Faith, you are beautiful." She screwed up her round face and let out a honking sob. At that point, I too burst into tears, pressing my fingers against both cheeks to prevent hot, salty water dripping onto the most beautiful dress in the world. Marilyn blew her nose, producing more honks. I thought about the frightful, flouncy frock hanging up in its layers of protective wrapping in my wardrobe, and cried even harder. Thick, hiccupy, non-bride-like gulps. Sheesh, I had to pull myself together. I hadn't cried in 8 years. Where was this coming from? My friend wiped her eyes, before offering me her orange baby food-stained handkerchief. With a look of horror, the shop assistant dove to intercept, handing me a pure white tissue from a lilac box. Marilyn shook her head. "You have to have this dress! or another one like it. The last one you tried on, or the one before that. Even the dress in the window with the purple bow and the weird frilly train, all of them are better than the ghost web. You have to do this, Faith. If you can't stand up to her, destroy it. Rip it, burn it, spill red wine on it, give it to Nancy and Pete. Nancy and Pete were Marilyn's twins, currently being looked after by her sister. I'll do it for you. I'll destroy the ghost web. The ghost web is Marilyn's name for my future mother-in-law's wedding dress, because it droops like a sorry, lonely ghost and is covered in peculiar grey netting like a cobweb. I know this dress well because, despite having only met my mother-in-law to be Larissa 4 times, she has decided that sometime next year I'll be, one or the other, down the aisle in it. That is, the aisle of her choosing. That is, the aisle of the Houghton Country Club. No, I didn't know either that anyone in 21st century Nottinghamshire belonged to country clubs, until I got a job in one a few years ago. The dress is too long, as at barely 5'3", I am 7 inches shorter than the original owner. The bodice also needs serious alterations, as I have what fashion stylists call an hourglass figure, and what my charming mother-in-law terms nothing a bit of hard work and self-control couldn't rectify. The reasons why Larissa insists I wear it are layered like an onion. The layers include control, selfishness, family pride, and superiority. I wonder if at the centre of this onion is the hope that when her son sees me walk down the aisle in that dress, he'll do a runner. Perry, my fiancé, wants to think it is a touching gesture, symbolising my warm welcome into his family. He hasn't seen the ghost web. Mission accomplished, Marilyn and I stopped off at a nearby tea shop. She sighed, shaking the equivalent of about 6 teaspoons of sugar into her full-fat latte. What are you going to do? I shrugged. I don't know. It's only a dress. I'll talk to the seamstress doing the alterations and see what changes she can make. That's not the issue here, and you know it. If this woman decides your dress, she's going to be hovering over you the rest of your marriage, like a ghost, or a spider in a web. You have to stop this now. You need your own wedding dress, or how are you going to be your own woman? I did need my own dress. The problem was I had no money to buy my own dress and no idea what kind of dress I even wanted. The truth? I had lost control of my life a long, long time ago. I still had the scar on my stomach from the last time I pushed to be my own woman. I'll talk to Perry, see what he says. You do that. Bat those gorgeous eyelashes at him. Now, what's next on the list? Next on the list was a church. I would rather get married in a wheelie bin than HCC. Having slept in a wheelie bin once, it might be more appropriate. Except nobody on the face of this earth except me and a drunk old man knows I spent a night there. Brooksby. An hour or so later, pressing on with the fake wedding plans, we drove into the village. Avoiding the road passing the House of Hideous Memories, Marilyn parked in the tiny car park next to the central square of shops. Houghton's poor neighbour, Brooksby, had grown rapidly since the initial slump following the pit closure. Well on the way to becoming a commuter town, the independent shops were being slowly replaced with high street chains, a bakery, a chemist, a newsagent and 2 decidedly non-super supermarkets. Coming to a stop outside the tiny chapel, I paused to look at the dark red brick, the one stained glass window and the ugly car park. Marilyn frowned at me. Here? I nodded. It was my mum's church. She got married here? No, she never got married. Will it fit an Upperton wedding? Perry's family, the Uppertons, would be planning an extravagant guest list. Well, given that this is my fantasy wedding, in which the sum total of guests equals 5, including your family, I think we'll manage it. She nodded her head. Excellent. I need plenty of room, since my body seems to have forgotten that it no longer requires the space for 2 extra people inside it. Let's have a butcher's. Marilyn must have been curious about my lack of fantasy wedding guests, and why 4/5 of them were made up of a family I had only known for a few weeks, but she didn't ask, and I loved her for it. I tried the front door, which was locked. We could see lights on, however, in the adjacent hall, so after knocking and waiting for a couple of minutes, we walked round and rang the bell by the side door. A moment later, it opened, and an older woman with hair like a shiny black helmet, a black pencil skirt and a starchy cream blouse, stood in the doorway. She looked us up and down, then at the path behind me. "Is it just you?" Yes. There isn't anyone else?" "I don't think so." We checked behind us, to be sure. "No one at all?" She sounded incredulous now, her face stiff, lips barely moving. "Well, you'd better come in. The others are waiting." She turned around and marched off. Slightly at a loss, we followed her up the steps, through a dark porch and into the church side hall. It had been redecorated since I had visited as a young girl. The cracking plaster had gone, exposing soft pink brickwork covered in bright paintings of outdoor scenes. Instead of the tired carpet, the floor now gleamed with light oak boards, and the rows were no longer cheap plastic, but a combination of wood and red-cushioned seats. The woman strode to the front of the room, coming to a stop next to an upright piano. About a dozen other people sat dotted along the first 3 rows. "Well, come along then. You've already missed the warm-up. Find a seat, please." "Excuse me?" I asked, as Marilyn plonked herself down on one of the chairs, shuffling about to get comfortable as she winked at the person beside her. The helmet woman ignored me, addressing the wooden beams above our heads. "Everybody back in positions. From the beginning, Rowan." An older teenager, presumably Rowan, cleared her throat. As the rest of the room stood up, Marilyn gestured for me to move next to her before opening her bag and pulling out a packet of toffees. Helmet woman blew out a large puff of air. "When you're ready, Rowan." Rowan, 5'2" of scrawny nothing, jerked her head at Marilyn, who offered her a toffee. "Who's that, then? I don't want to do it with them gawping at me." Helmet closed her eyes momentarily. "You know, this is our open afternoon. Would it make you feel better if our new recruits came to the front and introduced themselves? Then perhaps we can start. 7 minutes late." I answered from where I was. Sorry, but we're not here for this. We wanted to look at the church. I'm getting married." She stared at me for a good long moment, eyes hovering on the massive chunk of rock I wore on my ring finger, before seeking out Marilyn. "You! Put that disgusting bag away. No food until we're finished. None of that fake food, ever. Now, repeat after me." She let out a long, high, clear note that bounced off the stained glass window and rattled our eardrums. Marilyn stood up, about half a semitone lower, in other words, painfully flat. She sang, "I'll eat fake food if I want to, thank you very much." Helmet waited for her to finish and turned to me. "Ah," she sang, low like sweet dark treacle. I looked back at her. "Really?" "Come on, put that pre-wedding stress into it. Ah." She marched up to me as she sang the note, eyes piercing beneath beetling brows. I shifted about and glanced over at Marilyn, who smiled at me and stuck another toffee. Louder! Come on! You've got to give it more than that. I upped my volume minutely. Helmet stood about 4 inches in front of me and thrust her face forwards. Let go of your tension, she sang, all on the same deep note. From here, here, and here. She pointed to my shoulders, the centre of my chest and my stomach. La 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 la, let it go. Having a stranger stick her finger in my face and sing accusations about my stress levels, however true, did stoke my inner furnace. I had learned how to be tough, to be a survivor. I could happily have kicked my mother-in-law to the curb weeks ago, gone back to a life of grot and grime and struggling to keep my head above water rather than compromise my independence. But it wasn't about me. I would shut my mouth, swallow my anger, scoop up all my doubts, and carry them down the aisle dressed in a dish rag if it kept my brother alive. People singing in my face? Not happening. Back off, I sang. Helmet closed one eye, backing off slightly. Back off, like that, hold the note, off, release all your emotion onto it, off. She sang back every word at me. Off, I repeated, mentally adding a word in front of it that I wouldn't say or sing out loud in church. Once more, off, sing it with me. We sang together, and I allowed into that note about 5% of the frustration, fear, and helplessness squatting in my stomach. It seemed to be enough. A tiny crease flickered at the corner of her mouth. I guessed it was a smile. I did not smile back. Alto, you can sit with them while you wait for the minister to arrive. He'll be here at 4. She gestured towards the woman on the right-hand side. You, she pointed at Marilyn, feel free to keep plugging your mouth with those sweets, for now. I took a couple of steps towards the alto section, then another one back towards the door. Helmet spoke as she returned to the front. Take a deep breath. Let it out slowly. Has any portion of stress been carried off by that one note? That's just one. Think about what a bar, a line, a verse, a whole cantata will do. The power of music. One glance at those shoulders tells me you are a woman who needs to regain some personal power. That's what we're all about here. She was right. I did need to regain some personal power. It had felt good, larring out some emotion at the strange woman. I wanted to lar some more. Sing out some of the scrunched-up feelings so they could stretch and spread their wings. Maybe they would even flap out the door and never come back. Marilyn sat down again, pulled out an emery board, and started filing her nails as she whispered to the girl beside her. To be fair, it was as good a place as any to wait for the minister to arrive. I stole around to the alto seats, where a black woman who looked to be somewhere in her 30s moved along to make room for me. Helmet turned her attention back to Rowan, the skinny girl with hair like a Disney princess, and this time, instead of arguing, Rowan began to sing. How someone could flip from a coarse, jagged whinge to the voice of an angel, I had no idea. If I could sing like that, I would never speak. The notes were running water, the sun coming out from behind a cloud, an eagle in flight. The words weren't English. I guessed it was Latin, but I understood every single mesmerizing, heart-squeezing, aching syllable. 4 lines in, the other members of the group joined her. The water became an ocean, the sun a galaxy. At once beautiful, majestic, powerful and mysterious. They sang of loneliness and betrayal, utter sorrow and bitter loss, the harmonies blending together as they gradually grew stronger, building to a crescendo of triumph. Talk about goosebumps. Marilyn had been frozen, nail file in hand, since the second note. I wanted to clap, but feared the crudeness of the action shattering the glorious, lingering silence, so heavy I could touch it. Helmet pursed her lips. Not bad. You're getting it, soprano twos. Soprano ones, drippy. A cold, wet nose. Alto ones, clumpy. A drunk, overweight auntie dancing at a wedding. Alto twos, timorous. A bunch of morose mice. Again! With little rest between Helmet's metaphors, sloppy rice pudding, faded tea towels, anxious blue bottles, individuals were asked to repeat phrases, relearn melodies, copy strange mouth positions, and breathe in the right places. They broke up into the 4 different parts for group work and went over everything again. An hour later, as the choir closed by performing the whole piece one last time, somebody behind me did start clapping. Turning round, I saw a man leaning on the wall at the back of the hall. He nodded his approval, a thick mop of dark, unruly curls flopping, shadowy jawline, definitely more couldn't care less than designer stubble or hipster beard. Dressed in a scruffy jacket, with paint-stained hands and a tool belt strapped to his ripped trousers, I assumed he was the caretaker. Helmet dismissed the choir, and the group began murmuring as they checked their phones, 2 of the women opening the serving hatch into a kitchen where refreshments stood waiting. The man wandered over to where I sat, still slightly spellbound by the music, and nodded hello. "Are you going to join?" He had a faint Yorkshire accent, the solid vowels complementing his capable appearance. I shook my head. "I'm not sure. I sort of ended up here." He grinned, white teeth gleaming in his swarthy complexion. "I don't think anyone actually chooses to join the choir. More like the choir chooses you." "I was hoping to speak to the minister." "Oh?" He raised an eyebrow and started walking over towards the serving hatch. "Coffee? It's filter, or there's tea, but the coffee's better." I glanced around the room. With no minister-type person yet appearing, and Marilyn helping herself to a custard cream, I figured I might as well have a drink while we waited. Plus, I was freezing. "Tea, please." He leant forwards to speak to the person inside the hatch, and I noticed a streak of cobweb tangled in his curls. I pictured the ghost web, and the thought was followed by an inevitable ripple of disappointment. I hovered for a moment while someone topped up the teapot, waiting for the leaves to brew. The caretaker chatted easily with the rest of the women, flashing that brilliant smile, making a joke about the poor quality of the biscuits. When he turned to hand me my drink, one of them reached up and plucked out the cobweb, shaking her head at him before pretending to put it in her pocket like a souvenir. He ignored her gesture, nodding politely as he moved away. "I'm Dylan." He handed me my drink. "Faith." "Pleased to meet you, Faith. A perfect name for a choir girl." "Maybe. Shame I haven't got the perfect voice." I looked away, disconcerted by his open gaze. Disconcerted about feeling disconcerted. I had learned the hard way not to let a handsome man's smile get to me. "Oh, Hester'll find it in there somewhere. She knows what she's doing." "Hester? Ah, right, the choir master, mistress." I pretended to concentrate on drinking my tea. Dylan kindly ignored my flustered demeanour, probably well used to his effect on women, engaged or otherwise. "Yes, she talks tough, but she loves her choir. Refuses to let them settle for anything but the best." "The best singing?" "That too." We pondered that thought for a minute. Helmet, Hester, stood on the other side of the room, frowning as she listened to a young Asian woman wearing a headscarf and a long black cardigan with grey jeans. "You wanted to see the minister?" "Yes, I'm looking for a wedding venue." I pretended that I imagined the micro-flash of surprise on his face. I tried, with reasonable success, to believe my new, swanky haircut and expensive clothes hid the underlying truth about my utter lack of respectability, but the rapidly concealed expression was a punch to my guts. First Hester, now this bloke. Was this a magic church that revealed my hidden secrets to all of the staff? Did God tell them? This isn't most brides' first choice. Not those that aren't members, anyway. They tend to prefer the C of E. It makes for better pictures, and fits more people in. Why did you pick Grace Chapel? You don't live in the village, do you? Not currently, no. And I'd rather discuss that with the minister when he finally turns up. I heard the snap in my voice and tried to wind my wedding plan irritation back in. This was supposed to be a fun day, and it was only my fantasy wedding after all. Sorry, I don't mean to be rude, it's just private, and churches make me nervous. I can't help finding all the holiness a bit creepy. He shrugged, smiling to indicate no offence taken. Why don't I show you the chapel? Thank you, that would be great. I'll grab my friend. We spent a few minutes wandering around the hall, while the caretaker pointed out the relevant features, where the bride and groom usually sat, where the register was signed, and so on. The room didn't look ugly as much as boring. Plain white walls and ceiling, with one faded banner hanging in between two narrow windows on one side. More, a parquet floor and another piano, some shelves at the back stuffed with books, and that was about it. Marilyn prowled up and down the centre aisle. "Okay, we can make this intimate rather than cramped. Put some candles in the windowsills, hang fairy lights in the beams, tiny bouquets of flowers on the ends of the rows." She carried on describing her ideas for how we would turn this from dull to quaint and from soulless to romantic sophistication. Dylan, now sprawled on a chair with his legs stretched out into the aisle, straightened up. "Excuse me? Soulless? A more sensitive man could get offended by that. This is a church." Marilyn flapped her hand at him. "Oh, you know what I mean. Is this minister bloke single? A crusty old bachelor?" Dylan shook his head. "I'm not sure that's relevant." "It's absolutely relevant as to why this place is so stark." "Stark? That's a bit harsh." "The room's all about functionality. Where's the heart or the comfort? Anything that would make people other than cyborgs feel at home." "Cyborgs? Sorry, mate, this just isn't the type of place anyone would want to spend time in if they didn't have to. Ask the congregation." Dylan frowned and looked about, as though seeing the room for the first time. Marilyn was right, but we were strangers here, and her comments were pretty disrespectful. "Well, thanks for showing us round," I said, with a broad smile that would hopefully make up for Marilyn's lack of tact. "It was very kind, considering you've probably got much better things to do than listen to wedding plans. It doesn't look like the minister's going to show. Perhaps I'll call and make an appointment." "Although," Marilyn added, "if he's always this late, it doesn't bode well for the big day, does it?" My embarrassment grew. "I'm sure he's not, Marilyn. Ministers must have to deal with important, unexpected issues all the time. Maybe somebody died, or had some terrible news, or maybe Hester made a mistake." Dylan shook his head. "No, Hester doesn't make—" At that moment, the door opened and a man dressed in a dishevelled suit, one trainer and one house slipper, burst into the room, instantly followed by a potent cloud of alcohol fumes. "Son," he slurred, "my car's been stolen again." He shuddered violently and let out an anguished wail. "Why did they do it? Why?" Dylan strode over, putting his arm around the man's shoulder. "Hey now, steady on, we'll find your car. Sylvie's probably driven it home. Let's call her and find out." As he steered the weaving man out of the door, he turned and pulled an apologetic smile at us. "Sorry about this. If you look online, you'll find our website. The contact details are all there if you're still interested. Nice to meet you, Faith, and Faith's friend." Marilyn watched him leave, then winked at me. "What do you reckon? Interesting?" "Behave yourself, married woman with many babies at home. There's only one man I'm interested in." "You're not married yet. Haven't even set a date. Still plenty of time to avoid shackling yourself to the ghost web and the ghost web's previous owner." We began to leave too. I can put up with both of those if it means marrying Perry. No marriage or man is perfect. No, but take it from one who knows. No marriages are easy either. I love you, Faith, and will support you whatever, but this is supposed to be the fun, exciting, head-over-heels bit. If things are tough now, I don't know. My brain is frazzled. I'm probably transferring my own frustrated feelings onto you. We reached the car, and Marilyn looked at me before unlocking the doors. "You should be happy. Despite the family and all that goes with it, being with Perry should make you happy. Just make sure you're happy, Faith. That's all." Happy? What the heck did that even feel like? We finished our fantasy wedding plans with a trip to an Italian restaurant on the banks of the River Trent, just outside a village 4 miles from Brooksby. Housed in a large Victorian country manor with a spacious conservatory looking out onto the water, it boasted a riverside garden with chairs, tables, and assorted sofas on a canopied patio. Simple, rustic, relaxed, run by a family who had emigrated from Italy only 6 years before, it was everything I would have dreamt of in a reception venue, had I ever dared to dream of one. At the end of the garden was a wooden area for dancing. I could picture laughter and music, twinkling lights strung between the trees, great food, and even better wine. A place to let down your hair, sit back and watch the moon kiss the water. A place where good friends were reunited and new friends were made. I thought about the HCC function room and its stuffy decor, the fussy menu full of food most people, the strict dress code, the ban on children, the uncomfortable chairs, the fact that some there knew I had once been staff and now seethed at my crossing over to become one of them. Ugh, dress, service, reception. I didn't know which one of the current non-fantasy plans I hated most. Marilyn gazed out over the water as a barge glided by, slow and easy. She looked as though she wanted to hop onto that boat. I wished I could join her. "This is it, Faith. It's you!" I hugged her, vainly attempting to hide my tears. It was not me. It was the me I wished I could one day be, and now almost certainly never would. Chapter 2. Marilyn dropped me off at Perry's house on her way home. After keying in the security code to let myself into the gated mini-mansion, I found him pacing up and down the sitting room, blonde hair standing up on end where his hands had raked through it. "For goodness sake, Faith, where have you been? I was worried sick." "I was out with Marilyn, wedding shopping. Why didn't you call me?" "Your phone was off." "Ah, yes, that would be because I had turned it off in order to enjoy my fake wedding plans in peace. Sorry, but I'm a big girl. I do go out by myself sometimes. You don't have to worry."
Yes, well, I am worried. Dedicoat can't make Saturday. He's coming to finalise the Baker deal tonight.
I felt as though a shard of ice had been rammed down my windpipe. Perry had been working on the Baker deal for 10 months. I'd agreed to cater a dinner party for Perry and his colleague Eddie, to soften up the notoriously hard-nosed business guru, Lucas Dedicoat, before they signed on the dotted line. What time are they coming?
7.
Are you still expecting me to cook?
Well, yes.
I haven't got the ingredients yet. I mean, it's all planned out, but I need a trip into Newark and to the farmer's market. The berries need to soak up the liqueur overnight. I could ditch the dessert, make something simple instead, and rethink the mains. But an hour and a half! And you never have anything in the fridge. You should have called me. You did call me, but my phone was off. Oh, pants. Do you think a takeaway would do?
Perry sighed. No, a takeaway will not do. You used to work in a Michelin-starred restaurant. Can't you rustle up something?
I guess I'll have to try. But I really need to shower, and I looked down at my casual skirt and t-shirt. I can probably find time to brush my hair, but that's it. Can you sort the dining room, get some wine opened? I looked around the room, at Perry's shoes kicked off by the sofa, an empty beer bottle and crisp crumbs littering the glass coffee table. This morning's newspaper was in pieces all over the rug, and various other man detritus lay scattered throughout the ground floor. What time did you get in from work? Have you been sitting around waiting for me? I waved my hand across the mess, and Perry smiled, a glint in his eye. He quickly crossed the living room and wrapped his arms around me, firmly kissing the top of my head. I've been waiting for you my whole life. And you're really sexy when you're up against a challenge. I know you'll do something incredible. 2 hours later, after 13 emergency texts to Marilyn on posh business deal-making dinner party etiquette, I was hiding in the vast kitchen, trying to arrange on a serving tray 6 goat's cheese soufflés that neither tasted like goat's cheese nor looked like soufflé. I had cobbled together a meagre salad out of a few carrots, an old soft beetroot and some frozen French beans. A sort of paella bubbled on the stove, again full of mainly frozen ingredients and a packet of instant spice mix. I picked up the tray just as Perry poked his head in at the door. "What are you doing? We'll have no time to discuss the deal if we don't eat now." "I'm doing my best." Perry looked at me, at my face mimicking the beetroot, my crumpled skirt and unwashed hair. My eyes, no doubt wild-looking and bloodshot, scrunched shut. It was only a matter of time before Perry Upperton realised my best was not good enough. He took 3 strides into the kitchen and placed his hands on either side of my face. Leaning down to kiss me gently, he murmured, "You look so gorgeous, all steamed up and dishevelled. Don't worry about the food. Dedicoat's girlfriend just told us she likes fried chicken because it's fun to eat out of a bucket, and all Eddie's interested in is getting this deal done. Just come and sit down. Try to enjoy yourself." I would have enjoyed myself more had I been eating cold baked beans out of the tin, hiding in the back of a musty wardrobe. I know this to be a fact because I have done it. "So," 5 minutes later, Eddie's wife Fleur gave up pretending to nibble her soufflé. "You're the one who Wherever did he find you?" I took a deep breath, but before I could reply, Perry answered, "We met at HCC about 2 years ago, but it took more than half that to persuade her to come for dinner with me." "Really? How fascinating. You're a member of the club?" Her eyes flicked across my faded t-shirt and back to my never-been-facialed face. "Yes, I am now. It was an engagement present. I think my in-laws-to-be probably bribed someone to let me in." How very old school. Are your family from around here? My mum grew up in Brooksby. Are your family local? Well, you could say that. Do you know Teppington Hall? Yes, actually. I worked there as a cleaner once. As we slogged through our starters, I struggled to pay attention. Eddie and Perry swapped increasingly flash stories about their triumphs in the business world, name-dropping and backslapping as they tried to impress Lucas Dedicoat. Fleur, no doubt an expert at wooing one's husband's boss, batted her eyelashes, simpered, and even stooped to titter at a particularly unamusing story about beating a rival company during an award ceremony dance-off. We all pretended not to notice Lucas spoon-feed the soufflé into his girlfriend's mouth, shuffling his chair around so his back was turned to the rest of the table, and murmuring into her neck repeatedly as she giggled and told him to behave. A faint scorched smell began to waft out from the kitchen. However, unsure of the dinner party rules and unable to find a natural pause in Eddie's current monologue about how the company's core competencies included cost containment, I stayed put, hiding my agitation behind a fake smile. Eventually, Eddie finished, muttering something about not having the distraction of girlfriends next time so they could actually get some work done. Leaping up, I dove into the kitchen to find a dried-up, hissing disaster where the paella used to be. Oh, no, 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 no! I whipped the pan off the hot hob and grabbed a spoon to inspect the damage. Scraping beneath the surface of the rice, I found a thick black layer of carbonized sludge. I skimmed off the top layer, dumping it in a serving bowl and chucked in some water from the kettle, staring it maniacally in a vain attempt to rehydrate the non-scorched rice. Oh! Some water splashed out of the bowl and landed on my pale blue t-shirt in a greasy, grainy splodge right in the middle of one breast. Well, at least I used a teaspoon to scoop up a rice blob and taste it. Well, it'll taste better hot. I shoved the bowl into the microwave, taking a frantic minute to figure out how to turn it on before realising it wasn't plugged in, and then sponged at the mark on my top with a dishcloth. Lovely. Now I had a much larger brown circle covering my chest. For a second, I contemplated adding a second circle to the other side to balance it out, before a wave of forced laughter through the dining room wall yanked me back to the situation at hand. The microwave pinged. I dumped the now sizzling bowl back on the side, plucked a few leaves from a shriveled basil plant on the windowsill, and scattered them across the top. Perfect. No one will even notice. I looked at the leaves bobbing about in the grey liquid, surrounded by flecks of ash. It's a new trend. Seared paella. Yum. Only someone totally out of style would admit to not loving it. Hot humiliation pricked my eyes. This wasn't funny. It was Perry's big deal making dinner, and I'd fried it to a frazzle. Perry smiled at me as I brought through the bowl of charred slop, carrying it awkwardly in an attempt to hide the stain on my shirt. I looked at the guests in their chic, smart, casual outfits, their nails manicured and teeth bleached. On the wall behind the table, a huge mirror reflected back my fraught face, red cheeks, out-of-control hair, a smear of sauce on the side of my nose, eyes red-rimmed. For a second, I was back in the pigeonhole I had put myself in for so many years. One of them, not us. Ha! I glanced down at the bowl and back up again. I had a lot to hide. A burnt paella and a messy top didn't even register on the secret scale. I placed the bowl on the table, slightly harder than intended. Okay, this is burnt and is, quite frankly, inedible. There's nothing else in the cupboards except for dry pasta and a sachet of custard. Charlie's Chips, however, is open until 11. They do an excellent battered sausage. Oh, and the stain on my boob is burnt paella juice.
The silence hung above the table for a couple of seconds. Then Lucas coughed and said, "I'll have haddock and chips. Lots of vinegar and mushy peas, please." Fleur blinked a couple of times.
Do they?
"The kebabs are pretty good." Perry winked at me. "Or how about a pickled egg?"
In the end, the men decided to walk to the chippy together. To my surprise, Fleur and Dedicoat's girlfriend, Star, came to help me clear up, equally outraged, sympathetic, and impressed when I told them how I'd created a 3-course meal out of leftovers in under an hour. And Eddie's rambling anecdotes meant it got ruined. I apologise on his behalf, Faith. Usually I kick him under the table to shut him up, but he'd warned me to be on my best behaviour in front of Dedicoat. Having said that, if he sprang a dinner party on me with less than 48 hours' notice, I'd be kicking more than his shin.
The only thing I can cook is pizza and pot noodle.
Star marvelled at my desserts chilling in the fridge. Individual Irish cheesecakes made using an old packet of ginger biscuits, a tub of cream cheese, Perry's secret chocolate stash, and a splash of Baileys. Star lent me a spare top.
I always carry a couple, 'cause I sometimes end up staying out all night, and I might have a meeting at work.
This is what you wear to your work meetings? The top was low-cut and completely transparent. I decided to wear it over my t-shirt rather than instead of it. The blotch of saw still showed through the netting, but at least the crystals and picture of a dog in a onesie provided some distraction. The men returned, boisterously banishing plates and cutlery in favour of tiny wooden forks and chip paper. Lucas made me feel a lot less self-conscious by accidentally squirting ketchup over his shirt, and we ditched any lingering trace of formality along with the table. Lounging on the sofas, cans of pop in their hands, Lucas and Eddie toasted a done deal over their empty wrappers, while Perry rummaged through his dresser looking for a pack of cards. Star and Fleur giggled as they Googled wedding paraphernalia on their phones, swapping stories of best and worst ever in various different categories: bridesmaid dresses, best man speech, first dance. Amongst all this merriment, I sat back and gave myself a mental pat on the back. If this was how posh married people's dinner parties went, I could handle it. I could even look forward to it. Perhaps next time I'd think up a fast food menu, do a homemade pizza with chintzy paper napkins and a tablecloth you could colour in while you waited. The doorbell rang. Feeling quite the hostess with the mostess, I wandered through to answer it. And there, standing in the porch, soaking wet, was the reason I had finally given in and said yes to Peregrine Upperton. I quickly pulled Sam into the kitchen, searching his face for the telltale signs of drugs or alcohol. Flicking on the coffee machine, I pushed him into a chair. "Don't move!" I threw the cheesecakes onto a tray and carried them into the living room. Perry stood handing out pens and pieces of paper.
"Who was it?"
I hesitated, causing the guests to look up at me, suddenly interested. "It's Sam."
"Ah."
Perry had only met Sam once, the day he left the treatment centre. As Perry had paid for it, I figured the least I could do was introduce them. What I had chosen not to mention was that the centre didn't only treat mental health issues, which had crippled Sam for years. It also provided rehabilitation for those suffering from addictions. And my poor, lost, smashed-up brother ticked that box too. In the 3 months since then, Sam had moved back into his flat, 1/2 a mile from me in Houghton, kept up his medication and willingly attended his support group once a week. He had even talked about painting again, his rickety means of earning a living. But I had been waiting for the crash, expecting it. I had been through this too many times before to hope the cycle was broken. I knew the symptoms of my brother's plunge into the black whirlpool of mental illness all too well. The shadows in and under his eyes, the self-obsession, the increasing fixation on trivial matters like a dripping tap or the pigeons on the neighbour's roof, the inability to sit still or keep the thread of a conversation, the escalating chaos both external and within, and then, inevitably, the crash.
Is everything okay?
Perry stood to take the tray from me.
Sam is Faith's brother. He lives on the other side of the village.
Oh, how lovely!
Star looked up from her phone.
Bring him in so we can meet him.
Well, I would, but he's not feeling great. I'll just be a couple of minutes. Please, start without me. Perry met my eyes, his unanswered question hanging in the space above the tray. I gave an infinitesimal nod and left them to their world, rejoining mine in the kitchen. Sam slumped onto the breakfast bar, his arms over his head. I poured him a coffee and brought it over. Drink this. He ignored the cup and me. Sam! Pulling his head up from under his arms, he looked at me with utter bleakness. He's coming out, Faith. What? An invisible, icy hand clamped itself around my neck and began to squeeze. In 2 weeks. They're letting Kane out. The last thing I heard were the smash of the coffee mug into 1,000 shards on the Italian tiled floor, and, a split second later, me crashing down with it. Chapter 3. Sam started drinking almost as soon as the trial finished 18 years ago. We were living with our grandmother back in Brooksby and still reeling from the hideous shock of our mother's death. At 6, I had been more sheltered from the horrors of what had come before, and the night that ended it all. It was only as I grew older that I began to grasp what both my mother and Sam had shielded me from. This being, primarily, the monster we called Kane. Upon moving to Grandma's house, Sam continued his role as protector, holding me when the nightmares came, brightening my days with silly stories and surprise presents like a flower or a piece of paper twisted into the shape of a mouse, coaxing me out of my hiding place in the wardrobe. He walked me to school every morning before sprinting to reach his secondary school on time. He helped me with my homework, took me to the park or the library when Grandma needed a rest, and every single day made sure I felt safe, loved, and that I was not alone. But the previous years had taken their toll, done deep damage that refused to heal long after Sam's physical scars faded. Grandma tried, but she was hopelessly ill-equipped to deal with the anger and hurt of a boy with Sam's level of trauma. When I remember that time, I still feel my growing distress as my hero began to disappear, frequently staying out well into the night, retreating into his bedroom the rare times he remained in the house, and meeting Grandma's worried questions with silence. It was only when I got the unexpected invitation to a classmate's party, held in a pub, that I realised the smell accompanying my brother was alcohol. By 15, his attempts to drown out the pain had progressed to cannabis, pills, and soon after, cocaine. He scraped through school for my sake, still surfacing enough to be a surrogate daddy as best he knew how. But the stealing and the lies, the fights and the increasingly bad reputation were more than Grandma could cope with. The week after his 17th birthday, when a man showed up, she finally cracked. Sam came home the next day to find his meagre possessions waiting in a suitcase in the hallway. For the next few years, my big brother was a fleeting shadow in my life. Without him, I felt as though I had lost a lung, even breath a challenge. I clambered through the days exhausted, faint-hearted, a whimper of a girl. The days I would exit the school gates to find him slouched against the wall across the street were like brief bursts of oxygen. We would hug for a long, long time before setting off to walk around the village. We'd sit in the park on warm days and make daisy chains, or find a seat in the cafe if it was too cold or wet. "How are you?" he would ask, eyes hungry as he searched my face. "I'm fine. I got an A in English," I replied on one of these visits, thawing my fingers on the mug of hot chocolate he'd bought me. He smiled. "Good for you. You look taller. Have you grown again?" "I'm taller than Grandma now." "Is she being okay? Managing to take care of you? Does she give you enough money for clothes and things?" I felt too anxious to tell Sam that for weeks now I had been the one doing all the shopping and paying the bills. "Yes, we're fine." "Good." He sighed, and I caught a whiff of the toxins on his breath. "Look closer, Sam. Look at me. I'm not fine. I need you. Grandma keeps forgetting things and getting tired all the time, and I'm trying to make her pension last till the end of the week, but it's so hard. I need you. Come home. Come back to me." We would chat a little longer, but soon his hands would start to twitch and eyes wander beyond me to the cafe door. Sometimes, before going, he asked if I could lend him money. Other times, he would offer out a fat roll of notes. I didn't take them. Those notes scared me. They were tainted with the unmentionable things he must have done to get them. Instead, I would lie about how Grandma had doubled my pocket money that month, which could have been true. 0 doubled is still 0. Or how I'd babysat for a neighbour. But even when the months stretched without a visit, every night I went to sleep thinking of my brother, praying for his safety, wishing he would come home, imagining the dark and dangerous places and people he dwelled amongst. Then, one morning, I woke up to find Grandma cold on the bathroom floor, and I learnt my wildest imaginings hadn't come. Sam fled before the coffee had cooled on the tiles, but by the time Perry had carried me to a sofa, tidied up the mess and said a charming, if brisk, goodbye to the guests, I felt recovered enough to get up again. Perry found me in the kitchen. I turned from loading the dishwasher, 1,000 apologies on my lips. "Leave that, I can do it. You need to sit down." I mustered a weak smile. "No, I'm fine, just embarrassed. I didn't think I could top that meal, but—" Perry leant against the countertop, his hands in his pockets. "What happened with Sam?" "It wasn't Sam. I'm really sorry he came round. He does that sometimes when he's not well. And when he texted me earlier this evening, I mentioned I was here, but I must have had a weird migraine. Or maybe the residual smoke overpowered me. It's been a really busy day." He walked over and took my hands in his, lifting one to kiss it. "I'm sorry I caused you so much stress. You were amazing tonight. You saved the day. And the baker deal. I'm so glad you were here. Will you come to all my disaster parties?" "If you give me a couple of days' notice, they might not be a disaster." He gazed at me. 15th of August. Now, that should be enough notice. He was no longer laughing. "Marry me on 15th of August. Come and live with me, and you can burn my dinner every night." "You expect me to cook you dinner every night when we're married?" "You can do whatever you darn well like. Just marry me." I took a deep breath. "The 15th of next August?" "The very next one." "HCC will be booked up right through the summer." "They had a cancellation." He quirked one eyebrow, knowing I would guess his hefty sway at the club would have had something to do with that. "Let me think about it." While Perry drove me home, I did think about Sam and my empty bank account pathetically dependent on Perry since my income had been slashed, about how this rich, charming man had laughed off the disastrous evening, allowing me to avoid answering his questions about my wreck of a brother, about the fun we had together, the simplicity of our relationship. Then I considered the alternative to marrying him, which made me shudder. Perry walked me to my door, which wasn't far, the front path of my tiny terraced cottage stretching 3 steps from pavement to porch. I could come in for a bit. No, honestly, I just need to sleep. He waited while I unlocked the door, then kissed me goodnight. Sleep well. I've meetings until late tomorrow, but I'll call you. I took a deep breath as he turned to walk down the path. Yes. He froze, spinning slowly back around to face me. The 15th of August, next year. Yes. Perry burst into a grin, scooping me off the doorstep and swinging me around before jigging down the street and back again, kicking his heels up. 15th of August! He roared. 11 months and she'll be mine! Hallelujah! He let out a whoop as I stepped inside, smiling. Keep it down! It's nearly midnight. I don't care. I'm getting married! He fist-pumped the air as the upstairs window opened next door and my neighbour called out, For mercy's sake, Faith, can't you just invite him in like a normal person? Ah, no, kind neighbour, Perry replied, ever the gentleman. Surely you know there is nothing normal about Faith Harp. I said good night and closed the door, leaning on it for a moment while my brain slowed down enough to think. Perhaps my fiancé knew me better than I thought, because he'd got it spot on. Nothing about me or my life had ever been normal. I certainly didn't feel normal as I lay awake, listening to the creaks and groans of my ancient house, shuddering with terror at the thought of the evil that was Cain, prowling the streets, hunting for revenge. The next morning, I stuck my game face on and went to see Sam. I took the bus to the supermarket first, loading up with bags of ready meals, cereal, fresh juice, fruit, and other simple food a sick man could eat with minimal preparation. Upon letting myself in, I did a quick walkthrough of the flat, searching for the all-too-familiar paraphernalia that accompanies drug use. Finding nothing in the living area but empty cola bottles, 10,000 cigarette butts, piles of dirty dishes, and sticky filth coating every surface, pretty impressive since I had cleaned the entire flat only 5 days previously, I moved on to the bathroom. Yuck. I left the bathroom to its grossness and began to unload the shopping. I was placing a tub of fresh soup in the fridge when the bedroom door opened and a naked cheese string walked out. What are you doing? The cheese string, who on closer inspection appeared to actually be a woman the width of a cheese string, with an enormous head of greeny-yellow dreadlocks, jabbed the knife in my direction. I wasn't intimidated. The scars on my collarbone and stomach were caused by a knife and person about twice the size of those in front of me. 6 inches would never pierce my toughened hide. Unpacking some shopping. Do you want a cranberry muffin? She waved the blade a little less convincingly. Who are you? Clearly no one for you to worry about. I'm bringing stuff in, not taking it away. Reverse burglary? I carried on emptying the bags. Put the knife down and get some clothes on. And while you're in there, tell Sammy's sister's here. She obeyed me, even coming back in a scruffy tracksuit and making a token gesture at washing up while introducing herself as April. Sam shuffled out a few minutes later, olive skin wan under his black beard. I handed him a bacon sandwich, set down a mug of tea, and tried to hold back my newly resurrected tears and my temper. Would you mind leaving us alone for a few minutes, please, April? I asked. April, one of the many, many sorry young women to fall for Sam's brooding good looks and artistic talents, ducked her head. "Is it all right if I have a shower, Sam?" He ignored her. April disappeared, and I took a seat opposite my brother. "Tell me." He rubbed his face, took a gulp of tea, and started to weep. A short while later, having read the letter from the probationary service explaining that Kane would indeed be free in 2 weeks' time, unless something miraculous happened, like he murdered someone else or tripped in the shower and broke both legs and arms, we were wrung out like damp washing. We had no reason to believe Kane could find us, even if he tried. Sam and I both took different names after the trial, and no one alive knew, save for the original family liaison officer assigned to the case and a couple of social workers we hadn't seen in over a decade. While we did currently live in our mother's home county, we were several miles from Brooksby, 119 miles from where we had lived with Kane, and 250 from the prison that would release him. It had been 18 years. He would be on probation for the rest of his life, one of the conditions being that he never attempted to contact us. He had other things to worry about, scores to settle. Did all this make the slightest bit of difference to the lightning bolt of terror? Nope. I called Sam's mental health nurse and told her he was struggling. She promised to be round after wading through the other reams of dangerously distressed patients on her books, most of whom were without a sister with bucket loads of free time to care for them. I sat with Sam through a couple of hours of daytime quiz shows, then double-checked for hidden booze stashes. Before leaving, I firmly told April her new boyfriend was an addict with serious mental health issues and in no fit state to offer any sort of relationship. If she did insist on hanging around and did anything at all to empower his addictions, I would take her teeny, tiny knife and chop her fingers off one by one. Yes, I was feeling angry and defensive that morning. My past life ferocity had been awoken from its recent slumber. I was talking the finger-chopping talk. Would I walk the walk? Probably not. I paced the streets around Sam's flat, ending up on a bench near to the cemetery. Having brought my hyperventilating under control, I called Marilyn. "Faith, how are you doing? Did you destroy the ghost web?" "Least of my problems." "Hi, Marilyn. I need cake and a baby to cuddle. Are you busy?" "I have 9-month-old twins. I'm always busy, yet never too busy for cake. I'll leave the door on the latch in case I'm feeding, or just too knackered to get off the sofa." I spent the rest of the afternoon tickling fat tummies, Nancy's and Pete's, not Marilyn's, and eating Millionaire's shortbread, which Marilyn found amusingly appropriate. Halfway through the afternoon, Perry texted to say he'd booked the wedding with HCC. That led to a wrestling match with Marilyn while she prized my phone away and started typing a reply saying I wanted to get married in Grace Chapel and have my reception at Mirabelle's on the water. Marilyn! Nancy chose that moment to throw up on her activity centre, allowing me to get my phone back. I don't care. I just want things over with as little fuss as possible so I can get on with being Perry's wife. As little fuss as possible? And you see that happening at HCC? Have you met your future mother-in-law, Larissa Upperton? Have you been to a committee meeting? Did you not used to work at HCC as events manager? Short-term pain for long-term gain, Faith. That man appears to be bonkers about you. Why do you think he would object? She paused in her cleaning up of Nancy's sick. I waggled my hands back. Hello, have you met my future mother-in-law, Larissa Upperton, the Achilles heel? You need to come back to the choir with me next week. Get some personal power. You're going back to the choir? Hester didn't even let you sing.
I sat back, surprised. I don't care. I like listening. And my sister doesn't have to know that when I ask her to babysit again. 2 hours without my delightful children. 3, if you count the journey there and back. And once James is gone again, the chance of a breather might be the only thing keeping me from going bananas. James, Marilyn's husband, worked as a consultant geologist. This meant frequent long stretches away while he mined for valuable minerals in places like Antarctica or at the bottom of the ocean. Marilyn told me that before the twins had been born,